Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode 114 in the People in Fundraising podcast series, which began over 2 years ago, right around the time that I met today's guest, Madeline Zimmer, who is joining us from Wyoming. Good morning, Madeline.
Good morning, Tim. Thanks for having me on. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it's been great to chat with you a little bit this morning and before we started recording. And yeah, a long time coming in the sense that we met at an Apra Rocky Mountains conference in Grand Junction, Colorado 2 years ago, and hit it off about aliens and also, certainly prospect
conversation.
Yes.
It's a wonderful time.
Absolutely. And so it's just been great to be connected with you ever since, and I appreciate you making time today to be a guest on People in Fundraising. So tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of title, institution, how long you've been in the field, please.
Sure. I work for the University of Wyoming Foundation, and I am their prospect and donor strategy manager on the prospect research team. So probably a very familiar space for listeners to this podcast. I would imagine it's prospect research heavy.
Yes.
And I have been back with the university since May.
Okay.
I worked there since 2020 until 2023, early 2023. And then I left to take a fundraising job at the Wyoming Community Foundation. But I just missed all of my prospect research nerds, mostly Caden Farron, just best guy ever. And in all seriousness, I really missed my team. I missed working in this space. I really liked fundraising, but it was a very solitary endeavor, and I miss the team dynamic that you can have in a prospect research team. So we figured out a way for me to come back, and it's been going well so far.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, it's a good team at the foundation in Wyoming.
It is. We have several really, really great. Well, all of them. We have several people. They're all really, really great. So
yeah, very cool. So Madeline, for our audience, if you could rewind a little bit further, you talked about the two institutions and prospect research, but I would love to hear how you entered the nonprofit field. And I know from conversations in the past that you had worked with wildlife conservation or rehabilitation and sanctuary work as well. So tell us about sort of that journey and then how you got into the nonprofit space in the development side, please.
Yeah. So in my early 20s, I was interested in volunteering with an organization that did wildlife rehabilitation. And I ended up volunteering there. I ended up working there more seasonally. So I really fell into nonprofit work. And then eventually I went on full time there, and it just sort of took over my life for 7 years.
Okay.
So I spent a long, long time at one organization, and I learned a lot in that time about nonprofits from a very grassroots perspective, like very much local and low resource, I would say at the time, like the true nonprofit that you envision where there's like 4 people and they're all working 7 days a week and they're all like really into it, but it's not actually very fun because you're just never off.
Right.
But it was a great experience and I loved it. I miss it still, actually. And it's a great organization. It's called Rockfish Wildlife Sanctuary in rural Virginia. And they have a really wonderful director now, and they're doing really great work. And they just had their 20th or 25th anniversary.
Oh, cool.
So I was there forever and ever, and I loved it. And then I had been married, and we had moved out here to Wyoming for my former spouse's job. And I knew I would like to stay in nonprofits, but it was a little time called 2020. And
Yes.
there was not a lot available. So I ended up, I just kind of figured, we're in Laramie, I'll try to look at the university. And I was able to get an admin job at the University of Wyoming Foundation. So very much it's basically being an assistant to fundraisers. And I definitely felt like I could be doing more than that, but I was just really grateful and excited to have something here.
Sure.
And it turned out that I just really, really like everybody at the UW Foundation and have really grown to love it as an organization. And so much so that when I left for a different opportunity, I decided to come back within a year. I was like, I'm going to give it a year, I'm sure. And I just couldn't stay away. So it's been a great ride, but I came to the prospect research team sort of out of interest of like, what is this? This seems really cool. And talking to Kaden, like over Skype because it was 2020, right. Learning more about it. So I transferred into that team, and it's hard to imagine being somewhere else now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I went to your team's building in Laramie over 2 years ago. And for an advancement prospect research space, it is amazing.
It's the fanciest building in Laramie.
Yeah.
Which that actually wouldn't be difficult to achieve, but it's a really nice building.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's beautiful.
We love it. And we have parking, which anyone who works at a university knows, or at a hospital or any of these big fundraising operations. It's really great to be able to park.
Absolutely. So in your role, Madeline, in this second go around here at the foundation, I think you do more with portfolios and working closely with the strategy for gift officers. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay.
It's a new role we've created because previously I was doing prospect management, but everybody was doing a little bit of everything on the team, and we're growing the team and trying to make it more specialized. So now we have someone in data analytics. We have 2 full-time researchers who are amazing. They're like actual geniuses.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to kind of keep me dedicated to prospect research. And we, as an organization, have needed that for a long time. We've really needed better cohesion and like a unified strategy surrounding our biggest prospects, because, Wyoming is a really small state, and there are certain donors who have been with the university for a very long time, and 7 fundraisers have a perfectly good argument for why they should be assigned to them.
Sure.
And instead of everyone working on it, coming together with a unified strategy, you just have kind of weird stuff happen between fundraisers, which is natural. But we're trying to get to a place where we actually have really solid and clear plans for any assigned prospect. So that's really been my focus since I got back. And it's only been a few months, so it feels like nothing is happening yet, but things are happening.
Oh, good. That's good. Excellent. So thank you for kind of giving us that rundown of how you got into the nonprofit and specifically prospect development world. I want to pivot to this next question, because in addition to working in prospect development, prospect research, and strategy, you've presented several times in the few years you've been in the field. And one in particular was a little bit after we met, and it was a topic called How to Work Well, a professional development webinar. And this was for your Rocky Mountains chapter of Apra International. And I remember like the bio or about what the webinar would be about, and sort of examining the best practices and behaviors of good coworkers, workplace health, what is fair and transparent communication. So I'd love to hear how you came up with that topic, and do you feel like that's gaining traction, maybe specifically at the foundation or just in your outreach with other people in the industry?
Yeah, that presentation it had a lot of different tentacles, but I would say that the abbreviated version of it would be just like be pleasant. Just get pleasant with people at work.
Yes.
Because we work in a space where a lot of our communication is not face to face. And part of that presentation was like, yeah, you need to send your follow-up emails because you need documentation of things.
Yeah.
Especially in a public university. You don't want to have things just sort of floating around in a nebulous way, but there's nothing wrong with getting up and going and speaking to someone in person and then sending them a recap email. And we operate in this space where you get comfortable with your coworkers, and that's a really good thing. Like our team is extremely comfortable. There's a high trust level, but that means I still do it. I'll just send Caden a message without saying good morning. I'll be like, did you see this on blah, blah, blah? And I didn't say, hey, how's it going? Good morning.
Right.
Which if we were in person, we would be like, hey, good morning, and like give you 5 minutes to settle into your desk and go get your coffee or whatever.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was just sort of like, especially the first time you email someone. If I'm emailing someone on campus I've never spoken to and I need something from them, instead of just, hello, can you send me XYZ? It's like, hey, I hope you're having a good week. This is who I am. Like do an introduction so they don't have to just guess by your email that you should be emailing them.
Right.
Because we just, especially as you get more and more comfortable with digital work, we sort of become less human.
Yeah.
And we don't like follow up and ask people about the trip they told us they were going to go on. And
Correct.
it's like fun. It's fun to chit chat. I love chit chatting with people. So why wouldn't I do it over Teams when I would do it in the office?
Yeah,
So
good
a lot
point.
of it was about that kind of thing of just like keeping little fragments of humanity. Right now I have 3 screens in front of me and a cell phone, and it's crazy.
Yes. Yes.
Like it's getting weird.
Yes, it is.
It's just the kind of thing like go for a walk without your phone.
Totally.
You know what I mean? And if you're in a waiting room, like pick up the magazine and read it, or talk to the person next to you, or stare at the wall and be bored. But these phones are like, they're so addictive. And it's just like that. You go in the break room at work and 2 people are on their phones not talking to each other, which is fine. First of all, sometimes you're like, no, absolutely, I want to be doing my emails, whatever.
Yeah.
But we're getting digitized fast.
Oh, totally.
It doesn't leave a lot of room unless you create it for like chatting the way we did at the conference, which was we're sitting outside with a group of people talking. No one was on their phone, and like now we're good friends. So
Right, exactly.
it wouldn't have happened if we were just like checking our emails.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, very insightful observations. I was reading something this morning about screens and particularly phones. And it's not earth-shattering news, breaking news, but it's like, this epidemic of loneliness. And it was focused in the United States, but it may be happening around the world too, because phones are omnipresent. But yeah, like, we are addicted to our devices, and it takes us away from actual human interaction. And where is the consideration for what that is doing, not just to the people in your own orbit, but to the person themselves?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things you just talked about, like going out for a walk and leaving your phone at home, actually talking to someone instead of emailing them or texting them. Somehow we're not catching that message, and we're not understanding the emotional toll of being constantly connected.
Yeah. And feeling like you're just having these fragmented engagements with people where it's just, I need this, here you go, thank you, that's it. It's very transactional in a digital setting. And it doesn't have to be.
Correct. Yeah. Well, that brings me to my next question, which is a quote from a book by Brene Brown, and I've cited snippets from several of her books. Just sort of this theme of how to actually be interconnected. And have our actions be guided with grace. And like you said, to say good morning to someone and how was that trip? So I think that it ties into this quote that I'll read, and I'd love to get a sense from you about the value you place on being. And I remember your old bio at the University of Wyoming Foundation said, an actual human. And I would love, after you hear this snippet, if there are things that resonate along those lines, I'd love to hear it. So from Brene Brown, she said that when our actions and intentions are guided by spirituality, our belief in our interconnectedness and love, everyday experiences can be spiritual practices. We can transform teaching, leading, and other pursuits. Storytelling and creating can be these great practices because they cultivate awareness. And it doesn't necessarily mean spirituality in a church setting or defined by a specific dogma, but just, sort of how to be connected as humans in this space and time. So again, like that identity of like an actual human was very impactful for me when I saw that. I'm like, I'd love to know more, like what that means for you, and then just how you lead with having a desire to be connected with people, please.
Yeah, and I have to be honest, I can't remember when we did those bios. I can't remember exactly why I said that, if it was facetious, if I was, sometimes you read all these bios and it just feels like someone's going to say, and I'm from Mars or something, like it just feels like I'm like, the thing I can tell you is I'm a person too.
Yes.
Like who cares what my background is or like what I do in my spare time, really, like it's just, here I am, it's me.
Yeah.
But I can't really remember where that came from, but it definitely got a lot of comments. People were they thought it was really cheeky and funny.
Yeah.
But and it was also a time, was it 2022?
Yes.
Maybe? Okay.
Yeah.
So I was in like a deep grieving period. I lost my dad to suicide in 2021.
Oh.
And I think I just was in this place where it's like, can we cut the BS? And like, if we're going to do a thing, we're just doing the thing. Here we are. And, the Brene Brown quote is about spirituality. And you and I are so different because you're a very spiritual and religious person. And I'm pretty much an atheist, like I don't have a problem with people having religion, but it just does not resonate for me. I don't connect to it. I find it interesting, but
yeah.
So I would kind of want to supplement her or switch out spirituality with like meaningfulness.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that if, absent God, I don't think you can't have a meaningful life. And I think that's what I'm looking for is meaning and like preciousness, like I want the moments of life that are really precious.
Sure.
And those happen in those little interactions in the break room where you find out something really crazy about somebody that you never would have found out if you didn't have this, like, as we have these meandering conversations that take you all sorts of places and you don't know how you got there.
Right.
But it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been like, oh, do you like that coffee creamer? Like the stupid small talk takes you places.
Yes.
So at the same time that I'm like, let's cut the BS, let's be real with each other. You can't be real with someone without like a little warm-up lap.
Right.
And you need those just little stupid interactions. And I think we get busy and we get tired, or I'll say this, I get busy, I get tired, I get very irritable, not a patient person.
Yeah.
And there are times where I'm like, oh, I do not want to have to chit chat with this person.
Yes.
And then 5 minutes later, I'm so glad that I'm chit-chatting. Or I'm like, oh, I'm never chit-chatting with them again, which is good information, like it's equally valuable. So I think, Brene Brown she's cool, and she does like a really good job of capturing things that we know intuitively, and she puts them into words that make sense that we haven't been able to do. And she puts them into words that make sense that are pointing at studies and data.
Yes.
So I think she's at UT Austin, I think. And I think you should interview someone there, because then you can get to her.
Hey.
And then you can have her on your podcast.
Holy
and
cow.
she can give you a really good answer to that. So I think that's a pretty important action item.
That is. I will putting that out into the universe.
There you go.
Because yes, Brene Brown and David Brooks. I don't have a copy of one of his books here, but he's someone else I really admire, and I've actually copied several of his books passages and put them in these questionnaires too. So yes, challenge accepted. I'll
yeah, I don't, like, why not? You know, see what happens. She goes on podcasts all the time.
Like that warm-up lap you talked about is so important, because I remember, you and I had that sort of warm-up lap at the after party in Rocky Mountains. And I think we first connected because we both are transplants from the East Coast. You're in Wyoming, I'm in Utah. And then it was like, what's it like living in a very rural and much more conservative state? And for me, it was not quite as drastic, maybe, because I lived in an urban area, and I'm kind of in like an urban suburban area here. But yeah, it was like, let's connect about that, and then it led into lots of other questions.
Yeah, like outer darkness, which I still think about all the time.
Oh, do you?
It's so intense. I actually kind of like it, but it's frightening.
Oh, I could go there for our audience, but
it's a big topic.
It's a very big topic. Let's go to Bono instead. Let's go to this.
Okay. Take it in the other direction. Like outer darkness, inner lightness.
There you go. There you go. Yes, the ultraviolet.
Mm-hmm.
So about 2 years ago, Bono came up with this autobiography. I've got it right here. It's behind my little Star Wars figurines. It's called Surrender, and he did this really interesting concept where he wrote his autobiography, and each chapter is one of 40 different U2 songs, and they're one of my favorite bands, and very interesting way to write about his life. And as he was on the publicity tour for it, he was asked, why this book? Why now? What do you have to say that we haven't heard? Because he likes to get on his soapbox. But I really like this quote, and I want to tie it into how it resonates with you as a person and as a professional. He said that he wrote the book Surrender in an attempt for an argument that a life is the creative act, and the great canvas of life is all the things that you do with that life. And how, for him, that creative canvas just happens to take the shape of songwriting and performing in public, and how it's changed his life. And also that, for fans of their music, it can be similarly transformative. So how might that sentiment, that life is a creative act, speak to you? And in particular with this book, he talks about, reinvention as a musician and as a person. And, no one album is going to sound just like the last album. That's not meant to be. But in terms of creativity and reinvention as well, I'd love to hear any insights you have to share.
Yeah, there's a lot of different directions we could go with this, especially with that format and that setting where, like, I feel like it's begging us to talk about chapters of lives, and it's, intentionality versus like the random pull that you just sort of go through the flow of life with. But I think for the purpose of this podcast, it would make sense to connect it to, again, meaningfulness. And if life is creative work, what is he saying?
Creative act. Yeah.
A creative act. Thank you. It's sort of, so like, we all have to make money, unfortunately.
Right.
A pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And I feel like having stumbled into nonprofits at a really young age in my career and feeling that like every day, boots on the ground is an overused phrase, but it's adequate for this.
Yeah.
I felt really invested in the mission, working with wildlife, educating the public, working really hard, feeling exhausted at the end of the day. And like that meaningfulness came from like, this is where all my energy is going. And it has to go somewhere.
Sure.
So like I have to work somewhere.
Yeah.
So if I can sort of cheat the system and work somewhere where I like really believe in what we're doing. And with the university, it generally works out that way. Like I can be going through spreadsheets all day long and emailing people. And the end result is kids get scholarships.
Yes.
And people get an education. And right now, like for me, just politically, it's a little bit challenging to be in this institution because there's just a lot of decisions being made that I think are the wrong choice. So you come to that creative space where you're like, do I stick it out and like try to help make things better? Or do I quit and go find the next thing that's going to like let me follow my bliss,
Right.
like the thing that actually feeds you.
Right.
And I think that's where people in nonprofits, like everyone who works in nonprofits, even if you have two people working for two different nonprofits that are working towards exact opposite goals, they can connect on the fact that it's not because it doesn't make money. It's because it has a mission.
Yes.
And I think that's something that people, even in this weird space of nonprofits that we're in, which is a lot more developed and a lot more sophisticated than the vast majority of nonprofits in America, which are small and just sort of scrappy.
Yes.
I think you still find those people who are like, well, I don't want to go work for a big corporation that's just mining, minerals out of something like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You want to feel like, maybe my day was really boring today, or I don't like doing projects with so-and-so or whatever it is, but I know that I want to do it for what it's going to result in.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know if that at all answers the question that Bono has presented us with.
It does. It's genuine. And it's like, that sense of, the creative act is going to look, the canvas is going to look different every day. If you want to use an analogy, like, you can't paint, with watercolors today for this reason, and it's like, well, I can't work with so-and-so today because XYZ, or I can't connect with them because they're on vacation. What can I do with that energy? As you talked about, like, I've got this energy, this finite amount of time. I liked your comment too about, following your bliss. Like, it would be great if we could, get to a point where it's like, money's not a concern. I can just do whatever for my bliss, but you have to find that contentment and that purpose in the lived reality as well.
I think it certainly helps. I know there's a great argument to be made for people who are like, you don't have to like your work, you just do it, and then you have a really full life. But I've always been lucky enough to have this situation where it's like, they are separate and one is more important than the other.
Yeah.
But there's a big Venn diagram middle space where like those people are in both places, and like the things that you care about are in both places, and things you put energy towards would naturally be in both places. And I think that's it's a luxury, but if you can get it, and it doesn't have to be a nonprofit thing, but if you just like love doing graphic design and you have a job doing that, that's such a happier story for something you're spending at least 40 hours a week on than if you're like, I really hate everything about this job, but it pays well.
Right. Right.
Like, because you have to have the money.
Yeah.
You do. It's valid.
Yes. But then you're trapped, Yeah.
And you dread it. And then that takes energy away from you in both spaces.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that leads me to my final question here, because I know, certainly, before you got into nonprofit work, the work you did with wildlife rehabilitation, I think you've been an avid outdoors person. I think when we met in Seattle, like I asked, how's your running going? And I'm not sure if you were running with the consistency that you used to when I first knew you, but you just strike me as someone who's, who's drawn to the natural world, with the work with the animals in the past and being outdoors. And it leads me to this last question. It's a quote from a New York article by Andrew Sullivan from 2016, which was a pivotal year in American society. And it was titled, "I Used to Be a Human Being." And in this article, Andrew makes some arguments about, the challenges and the trade-offs of living a very online life. And it talked, as I read it again, it reminded me of something you and I were talking about earlier in our recorded conversation about, being on screens so much. And so in this article, he makes the point that we need to counter the distraction of a very online life by calling people to the goodness and wonder of the material, embodied, and natural world. And so, what aspects of the goodness and wonder of that material, natural world most draw you in and make you feel alive, make you feel connected with other people, and make you feel present, Madeline?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I did used to be really outdoorsy, and then I got so lazy. Is what happened to me.
Okay.
Got a good couch, spent a lot of time on that couch, but the reality remains that if you spend time outside, you feel better.
Yes.
And there's so much you can get any scientific study you want, or you can just go sit on your front stoop in the sun and not take your phone with you. And 15 minutes later, you might still be in a bad mood or still be sad or something, but you feel more alive.
Totally.
Like you're back in it. And we like, there's a reason we call it plugging in, Yeah. And then we call it unplugging to go outside and do that, but it's actually plugging in too. It's just plugging into a different thing. Yeah. And for, we're just like dumb animals. Like we're supposed to spend time outside. Like right. It's just complicated, Yes. And if you're not outdoorsy, it's like go read a book outside or something when it's nice out. And, I love the winters we have here because they're severe, but they're beautiful. And even I have to walk the dogs every day. That's what keeps me ever moving lately, is like those dogs have to be walked and they will not stand for a day that gets skipped. So you spend that time out there and you just kind of like, there's something about getting bored that lets you actually think.
Yes.
Because then your mind really wanders instead of your mind being pulled different places.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like there's something different there. And I don't think either one's bad, but it's nice to just let your mind sort of churn through garbage and process whatever thing instead of distracting from your mind and taking in more information, which you've been doing all day long.
That's
anyways
true.
At work. Like it's exhausting to take in information. And sometimes you just need to like mill it around. Yeah. And it feels like a waste of time now. It does.
Yeah, it does.
Even if you should do it, it feels like a waste of time. But I think that quote you read is just, he's just saying like, you just have to do it.
Yes.
Like it shouldn't be optional at this point because you're going to go nuts. And you can feel it if you watch too much TV or even if you read a book for too long, you kind of come away from it and you're like, but we do it all day long on the computer.
Yeah, we do.
Work. And then at the end of the day, you're like, man, why am I even tired? I was sitting around all day, but it's because you were taking in stimulus.
Oh, yeah.
Just like it's kind of crazy. Yeah. So I think that guy sounds pretty right. But I think it's just a simple, like, I just think we're dumb little animals and we need to go outside and like feel the sun on our face a little bit once in a while.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very good points. I love that reclaiming of the phrase plugging in. And it's not if you go outside, if you sit outside, go for a walk, it's not you're unplugging, you're plugging into like fundamentally who you are as a person and getting sunlight.
Yeah, pretty important.
So I do have an Arthur Brooks book somewhere up on that top shelf, and another one that I've drawn quite a bit of commentary from for these podcast interviews. And he had a recent interview on Facebook, like a short snippet, and he's a big proponent of like being a super early riser. He gets up before the sun rises, but like even before there's any trace of dawn coming, like 4 a.m, 4:30. And there is a particular phrase in Buddhism that contextualizes that time of day and what it means to a person. And I forget exactly what it is, but that hour before the sun comes up, Arthur Brooks advocates people, if they do that, they go outside, go for a walk, they leave their cell phones behind, and they just hear the natural world. And of course, you're going to hear commerce as well, but it's a less distracting time of existence that you can have every day. So I won't be practicing that to that degree, but
I want to, but I'm so bad at mornings.
Are you?
I want to so badly because there's something there too. Like you can think of that it's sort of like a little magical feeling when you feel like you beat everyone to the day. Like you're up and no one else is up, and it does feel good.
Yeah.
But getting here is really hard.
Oh yeah.
And it's also built in quiet time.
Yes,
like
it
what
is.
what other time of the day are you going to really have to yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or especially you with 4 kids.
Right.
That would be the time.
That would be the time.
And probably one of them's still up. So
we've had that this summer where
I believe it.
Yeah, they're still awake, and I'm closer to waking up than when I went to bed. So
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Madeline, thank you so much for your time today. I know that the content geared more towards the people in fundraising and less about the person, less about the professional side, but just a genuine and rich conversation. And I really appreciate your insights and our friendship, and just great insights that I think our audience can take away from your conversation today. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me on, and I'll always take any excuse to spend time with you. So
Dynamite.
it's been really, really great. Thank you.
I hope our paths cross again in person sometime soon. Before we were recording, we were talking about some potential conferences, and against the backdrop of budget constraints. So
but luckily we have Zoom.
That's right. And for our audience, thank you for supporting the People in Fundraising podcast series, webcast series. You'll be able to find Madeline's conversation on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the audio portion on Spotify and Podbean in early November of 2024. And until then, thank you all for supporting this podcast, and good to see you again, Madeline. Have a good rest of your day.
Great to see you, Tim. Bye.
Bye.